One misstep, and the empty space below offers no second chance. These bridges do more than connect two sides. They suspend humans between dizzying heights and their most instinctive fears. From transparent glass walkways clinging to icy cliffs to steel spans stretching across canyons hundreds of meters deep, every step demands absolute focus. Some are ancient rope crossings swaying in the wind, while others are modern megastructures extending over vast oceans where storms are a constant threat. This is a journey to the world's most dangerous bridges, where bold engineering and raw courage decide who reaches the other side. Kuandinsky Bridge. Originally a forgotten ruin of a legendary railway line, this bridge was never finished for cars, but remains a deadly challenge for the reckless. The surface is not paved, but is a jagged patch of thousands of rotting wooden railway sleepers, creating a rough surface like a giant spike bed testing the suspension. With no management, drivers are forced to carry their own wooden planks to manually patch up deadly holes that appear suddenly under the wheels. On this lonely journey, passengers must get out and walk as spotters, signaling every inch so the wheels do not slip off the blind edge. Even the most experienced drivers must always unlock and open the car door, ready to jump out to escape if the wind flips the car into the river. This is truly a dangerous gamble, where the line between life and death depends only on rotting wood and human survival reflexes. Deception Pass Bridge, USA. Stretching across the gorge like a gloomy steel web, this cantilever masterpiece is pinned firmly into ancient volcanic cliffs, shaded by old cedar and fir trees. Born during the Great Depression in 1935, this great structure was created by ordinary young laborers who had to hang on ropes to carry thousands of tons of steel over the abyss. Beneath the bridge, obscured into a wet cave, millions of blocks of seawater are squeezed through the crevice, creating brutal torrential currents up to 10 miles per hour. This suffocating water throat was once the ultimate maritime nightmare, tearing apart countless shabby boats that accidentally underestimated the destructive power of the tide. Travelers walking across here bear a suffocating feeling when squeezed into a narrow path of less than 3 feet, bursting into panic, facing the fragile railing close to a 180-foot deep hole. The blend between the macabre beauty and the violent gorge has cast a mourning curtain over the structure, turning it into a witness of chilling urban legends. Ubane Bridge, Myanmar. Standing tall through the passage of time, like a colossal rustic skeleton, this Myanmar architectural masterpiece proudly boasts being the oldest and longest teak wood bridge in the world today. Its survival over nearly 2 centuries comes not from flashy paint, but from its own natural oil that turns the wood into an impenetrable biological fortress against rot and termites. Swirling nature forces the bridge to face drastic fluctuations of the lake, from standing bare and towering 13 feet above the dried bottom, to being nearly swallowed by floodwaters lapping at its floorboards. That mesmerizing precariousness stems from 1,086 giant pillars initially lacking concrete foundations, driven only about 5 feet deep into the loose alluvial mud. Even more astonishingly, this entire 19th century structure is tightly locked with mortise and tenon joints without iron nails. The heavier the pedestrian step, the more solidly the wooden pegs grind together. Even so, the cruel reality of erosion has forced humans to secretly replace the rotting pillars with rugged reinforced concrete, silently shattering the original organic nature of this masterpiece. Trift Bridge, Switzerland. Suspended like a silver thread across snow-capped peaks, this 560-foot cable masterpiece is a tragic testament to the devastation of climate change. The bridge hangs at a height of 330 feet above a stunning cloudy turquoise lake, a place that completely did not exist before 2002, but was born from millions of melting ice blocks. Despite 6 weeks of dangerous construction by helicopters suspended over the abyss, this fragile-looking structure is perfectly calculated to withstand a load of up to 500 tons. As you step out into mid-air, the intentionally swaying steel floor and the humming, mechanical howl of the wind have caused over 50% of visitors to freeze their muscles in terror. Through the terrifying gaps beneath your shoes, your vision plunges straight into the jagged eternal ice, retreating up the mountain like a fleeing, wounded giant beast. This mid-air walking experience is not only an extreme nerve test, but also a sorrowful elegy about the irreversible fading of magnificent nature. Zhangjiajie Glass Bridge, China. Stepping out from the surreal frames of planet Pandora, this superstructure spans between sandstone pillars as high as 3,500 feet, like an invisible stroke in mid-air. With 100% transparent glass flooring, each of your steps is a direct confrontation with the deep abyss right under your shoes. The safety of the sturdy glass is astonishing, having challenged direct sledgehammer hits and 2-ton cars full of people driving over without any budge. On both sides of the bridge are creating a dramatic suspended ecosystem. As sunset falls, sunlight pierces through the glass and refracts into the canyon, turning the entire space into a surreal golden cinematic dream. This is also home to the world's highest bungee jump, ready to swallow daring souls into a free fall of nearly 1,000 feet in the heart of the canyon. Aiguille du Midi Bridge, France. Firmly planted into 2 sharp granite peaks like giant blades, this short steel bridge hangs suspended across the sky at an unimaginable height of 12,605 feet. To reach this kingdom, travelers must entrust their lives to the steepest cable car in the world, shooting straight up 9,000 feet without any supporting pillars. At that extreme altitude, the atmosphere is so thin that the sky always takes on a cold, dark blue color, bringing an overwhelming illusion of grasping at the edge of the universe. in the brutal winter of -40 degrees Fahrenheit. A cup of boiling water thrown down the 3,000-foot abyss will instantly explode into a sparkling cloud of tiny ice dust. Right next door, a transparent glass box protruding from the cliff forces travelers to stand bare over 3,300 feet of empty freefall air, capturing the majestic beauty of the eternal snow mountain range. Queswachaka Bridge, Peru. Hanging like a golden silk ribbon amidst a cruel canyon, Queswachaka is the only grass bridge of the Inca Empire that proudly defies time. At the harsh elevation of 12,139 feet, indigenous workers must chew coca leaves to suppress fleshly pain to braid grass into 4 main cables 16 inches in diameter. That soft parabolic curve stretches across 98 feet, suspended 49 to 59 feet above the churning water, creating a mesmerizing contrast to the surrounding gray cliffs. Every footstep across the bridge will chill your spine with the rustling, crackling sound of breaking grass, even knowing this woven masterpiece can carry a weight of up to 3,307 pounds. That absurd sturdiness absolutely needs no blueprints, but flows in the bloodstream and instincts of chief engineers passed down through 5 centuries. More than just the function of a pathway, this organic architecture was once a defensive shield, ready to snap in a flash to become a death trap, stopping enemies. Royal Gorge Bridge, USA. Hanging like a fragile silver spiderweb between 2 red cliffs, this structure proudly holds the crown as the highest suspension bridge in the United States. The 955-foot deep abyss below is more than enough to swallow a 90-story building, whose top still could not touch the bridge's wooden deck. This V-shaped canyon is ruthlessly narrow, with vertical cliffs nearly 1,000 feet high, creating the feeling that 2 giant walls are about to collapse into each other. This terrain turns the place into a terrifying wind funnel, causing thousands of wooden planks to emit a resounding, bone-chilling creak whenever vehicles roll across. Through the small gaps under your shoes, your gaze will pierce straight down to the roaring, white foaming water at the very bottom of the deep abyss. When winter fog obscures both ends of the bridge, shaky footsteps bring an overwhelming illusion of walking suspended on clouds straight into nothingness. Sunshine Skyway Bridge, USA. Reaching over the deep blue ocean like a brilliant yellow fleet of sailboats, this cable-stayed masterpiece over 4 miles long carries a magnificent beauty, but was reborn from death. The experience of gripping the steering wheel across here is a spectacular visual trick, as the extreme incline at the middle span completely cuts off visibility, bringing an overwhelming illusion of rushing straight into the sky. Located in the lightning capital of America, the 430-foot-high towers constantly attract blinding lightning strikes, and if the wind speed simply exceeds 40 miles per hour, all barriers will drop down to blockade death. Hidden beneath that pride is historical pain, when the old bridge was destroyed by a 20,000-ton machine right over the deep maritime channel, echoing with strong underground currents. Learning from blood, today's superstructure is armored by 36 underground concrete islands, a fortress strong enough to crush any 87,000-ton steel mass that dares to veer off course. The blend between the artistic wind-filled cables and the solid defense system has turned this place into an eternal, indestructible monument amidst the open sea. Seven-Mile Bridge, USA. Proudly spanning the violent dividing line between the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean, this superstructure is a flat highway connecting giant coral islands. With no mountains or hills to shield it, gripping the steering wheel brings an overwhelming illusion, like flying a plane at a height of 65 feet amidst an ultimately empty space. The most haunting thing on this journey is the pursuit of the metal tomb less than 200 feet away, the pitch-black ruins of the dead old bridge. That rusty corpse was once revered as the eighth wonder of the world, traded with the blood and lives of thousands of workers before being destroyed by a super hurricane. Rising above the tragic past, every year this place is locked down for hours to welcome thousands of people participating in an exhausting race for 7 miles under the scorching tropical heat. This ribbon on the sea is truly a magnificent masterpiece, where the brilliant present life proudly parallels the desolate ghost of the ocean. Ojula Bridge, Mexico. Born from the blueprints of the legendary minds who once created the Brooklyn Bridge, this 1892 cable masterpiece is imprisoned in a desolate desert just to drain millions of tons of gold and silver ore. Located deep in the most barren and brutal fire pit of North America, the structure is completely devoid of the moisture of life when continuously baked under temperatures of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That great steel frame endures extreme torture day and night, melting under the pouring sun during the day and shrinking painfully in the bone-chilling cold at night. Unlike solid concrete blocks, this 1,043-foot-long bridge is actually just a patched, skinny, wooden plank ribbon precariously hanging across a giant gorge. The gaping crevices on the floor ruthlessly expose the 328-foot deep hole, jagged with sharp rocks, forcing the eyes of travelers to look straight into the abyss of death after every step. Now, the former machine that gutted the mountain has turned into a ghostly path, helplessly challenging human courage amidst the decaying silence of time. Sidu River Bridge, China. Appearing like a brilliant yellow stroke of power, this giant suspension bridge pierces through the deep canyon as humanity's great challenge to nature. Suspended at a height of 1,550 feet, the silent, empty space beneath the bridge is so deep that it has more than enough room to swallow the Eiffel Tower, whose top still could not graze the concrete deck. To overcome the treacherous, dense forest terrain, engineers made history by firing a military rocket to pull a 3,281-foot-long cable to the opposite cliff. The strange microclimate disparity creates an absurd phenomenon where white clouds and seas of fog do not fly in the sky but roll right beneath the bridge. The empty space taking up to 10 seconds of free fall is so terrifying that drivers are always advised absolutely not to look down the canyon to avoid spatial vertigo defeating their steering wheels. Titleist Cliffwalk, Switzerland. Suspended at an altitude of 10,000 feet among the clouds, this masterpiece proudly holds the crown as the highest pedestrian suspension bridge in Europe. In this kingdom of eternal ice and snow, the air is so thin that it makes your heart pound even when you are just standing still. To build this wonder, humans had to use helicopters to lift 150 tons of reinforced steel through blizzards for 5 straight months. Through the fragile mesh beneath your feet, your eyes will pierce down into a 1,640-foot deep gorge, exposing the cruel blue crevasses of the glacier. The narrow walkway causes every gust of wind to transmit a terrifying vibration along the steel surface to the heels of everyone standing there. When fog rolls in and wipes everything white, this precarious walking experience suddenly turns into a solitary journey straight into an inescapable nothing. Charles Quonen Suspension Bridge, Switzerland. Invisible, like a fragile silver thread draped across the Alps, this masterpiece is humanity's proud effort to cross a deadly landslide mountainside. Due to its endless length, the bridge naturally sags into a terrifying U shape, forcing travelers to walk downhill straight into the heart of the abyss. Although stretching endlessly, the walkway is ruthlessly squeezed to a width of 2 feet, hanging in mid-air by only 2 main cables, with a diameter of just 2 inches. Without wooden boards for cover, the hollow steel mesh floor forces your eyes to pierce down to the jagged, lonely rocks 279 feet below your shoes. The haunting feeling rises as endlessly swaying footsteps constantly recall the previous bridge that was completely buried by giant boulders. Imprisoned in a narrow space amidst the vast sky, this solitary journey is truly a nerve test that defeats even the most resilient will. Langkawi Sky Bridge, Malaysia. Curving like a soft silk ribbon across the ancient mountain peak, this masterpiece is one of the longest single-pylon curved suspension bridges on the planet. At an altitude of 2,170 feet above sea level, the structure relies on only one giant steel pylon to support the entire 410-foot span suspended in midair. Beneath your feet lies a 500-million-year-old tropical rainforest ecosystem where giant ancient trees shrink into tiny green dots amidst the ocean of millennial leaves. The fear will be pushed to its peak when you step on the load-bearing glass panels, looking straight through to the abyss over 2,000 feet deep, right under your shoes. The harshness of the ocean and high cliffs frequently creates sudden fog, capable of swallowing the entire bridge in less than 60 seconds. Walking on this curved path is a spectacular visual journey where the boundary between the primeval jungle and the deep blue ocean changes with every footstep. Kakum Canopy Walk, Ghana. Plucking travelers from the ground to throw them onto the roof of the old forest, this suspension bridge system clings its vitality entirely to the trunks of 6 giant emergent trees. The bouncing floorboard, a mere 12 inches wide, forces travelers to shuffle in a single file, enduring sudden shock waves and a slippery surface slick with a rain of wild bird droppings. The enclosing nylon netting on both sides of the walkway also constantly disintegrates under radiation and acid from tropical mold, demanding endless manual patching by humans. Built in 1995, this precarious masterpiece is actually a desperate ecological bulwark aimed at suffocating the greed of loggers, destroying the great forest. Iya Valley Vine Bridges, Japan. Hiding like a twisting living entity across a gloomy abyss, the Iya Valley Vine Bridge system is Japan's most mysteriously legendary and tragic heritage. For this massive biological mass, weighing from 11,023 to 13,228 pounds, to hang proudly, indigenous workers had to gamble their lives climbing barehanded up steep cliffs to harvest the wild vines. The bridge span stretches solitarily across a void of 148 feet and hangs precariously 46 feet above the raging water, where sharp, cold reefs at the bottom constantly open their mouths, waiting to swallow errant footsteps. Poignantly, this masterpiece was born not for trade, but as the desperate defensive shield of exiled 12th century samurai warriors, ready to sever in a flash to drown the enemy into the deep abyss. Carrick Areda Rope Bridge, Northern Ireland, UK. Stretching across the churning ocean throat like a fragile spider web, this iconic Northern Ireland structure is actually a pathway leading straight into the fossilized magma core of a volcano extinct for 60 million years. The precarious bridge span reaches across a gap of 66 feet and hangs suspended 98 feet above the water, where violent waves are tearing white foam on jagged, sawtooth-like hidden rocks. The beautiful jade water below is a lethal chilling machine at 46 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, ready to drown anyone who falls with immediate muscle-spasming thermal shock. Few expect that this terrifying walkway was woven 250 years ago, not for sightseeing, but as a sweat-drenched survival gamble by fishermen to net migrating salmon runs. To shoulder tens of thousands of modern lives, that rustic, rough rope shell is actually hiding high-strength steel cable cores to maintain a completely fake, pristine beauty. Even so, the fury of the wind and storms is still enough to collapse human pride, causing many travelers to cry in panic on the rocky island and be forced to call a rescue boat in ultimate shame. Muzo Tsuribashi, Japan. Bearing the beautiful name of the Bridge of Dreams, this rusting ruin, stretching across the gloomy realm, is dubbed by explorers as the most terrifying suspension bridge in Japan. Stretching solitarily 472 feet amidst a perilous canyon, this steel cable skeleton hangs at a deadly height of 272 feet, right above a murky jade river, looking like an acid bath waiting with an open mouth. Abandoned since the 1950s, the rotting steel mass is constantly gnawed by moss and humidity, entrusting travelers' lives to anchors driven into crumbly sedimentary cliffs ready to collapse. The surrounding landscape is suffocatingly claustrophobic as the giant coniferous forest and steep rock walls crisscross to seal the sky, blocking the sunlight like a pale grey prison. This place is actually a grave burying the endless illusions of exploiting the forest, now turned into an ultimate humiliating nightmare, mocking anyone who dares to take a step. Husseini Suspension Bridge. Known as one of the scariest paths on the planet, this bridge looks more like a death trap than a safe transport structure. Located in a wind tunnel gorge without aerodynamic design, the bridge not only swings, but also snakes in a wave shape whenever the wind howls. The rotting floor planks are spaced so far apart that walkers are forced to look straight down at the ferocious river through gaping holes. The deep suction effect of the valley combined with the bridge's length creates a terrifying illusion, making the other side seem miles away and unreachable. Hanging at a height of about 100 feet, the water below is no longer soft, but turns into a hard concrete block if someone falls freely. A strange contrast appears when tourists crawl in fear, while locals calmly carry heavy loads across without holding the handrails. Chesapeake Bay Bridge, USA. Dubbed the most horrific psychological torture machine for drivers in America, this giant suspension bridge stretches proudly across the vast bay. With a length of more than 4 miles and suspended at a height of 186 feet, the structure is haunting due to its design with no emergency lanes and guardrails so low they strip away all sense of safety. Cold, crisscrossing blue-gray steel beams appear like the skeleton of an ancient monster, contrasting completely with the tiny appearance of container ships struggling in the deep water below. Even the strongest concrete pillars must strain to withstand the massive pressure from swift currents constantly eroding deep trenches at the bottom of the bay. Extreme fear here has given birth to the world's strangest service, where travelers are willing to pay $40 just to hire a driver to help them overcome their panic. Once the longest continuous steel structure on the planet, when inaugurated in 1952, this icon is now only remembered as a brutal test for nerves of steel. Mackinac Bridge, USA. Spanning a giant strait that divides two great freshwater lakes, this superstructure is a steel stroke bearing the absolute power of humanity. With a total length of up to 5 miles, gripping the steering wheel and gliding on the deck brings an overwhelming illusion, like a suspended voyage between the boundary of sky and water. When advancing to the center of the bridge, the mainland recedes and completely disappears, imprisoning travelers in a precarious iron cage amidst the vast empty space. A breathtaking feeling strikes when tires grind on the hollow steel grating lane, creating a terrifying metal screech and transmitting a strong vibration echoing straight into the steering wheel. Supporting that entire masterpiece are 2 giant suspension cables woven from 42,000 miles of steel wire, a terrifying length, more than enough to wrap nearly 2 times around the Earth's equator. Under the brutality of frost and blazing sun, this metal mass constantly expands and contracts as if breathing, causing the deck's length to change by up to tens of feet. Confederation Bridge, Canada. Piercing through the ferocious strait, this great 8-mile-long concrete machine is an ironclad treaty, permanently erasing the millennial isolation of an island. This $1 billion gamble of the century proudly turns 65 cone-shaped pillars into a giant machine, crushing 3-foot-thick ice floes, carrying a smashing force of 3,307 tons. Viewed from above, this grayish silk ribbon deliberately winds into a giant letter S to break the deadly highway hypnosis of the endless white desert. At the main navigation channel, the asphalt surface suddenly curves up to a height of 197 feet, sowing in drivers a heart-stopping illusion as if the road is about to snap in mid-air. Despite possessing ultimate mechanical power, this masterpiece still has to yield to the brutal hurricanes of nature. As soon as the wind howls beyond 43 miles per hour, the barrier system will immediately slam shut, absolutely forbidding humans to step on until Mother Nature calms her wrath. Akashi Kaikyo Bridge, Japan. Piercing the cloud layer, the 984-foot-high towers of this bridge float in mid-air like a gateway leading into the heavens. For a quarter of a century, it proudly held the throne as the suspension bridge with the longest main span in the world, with an unimaginable distance of 6,532 feet. To suspend this 2.5-mile-long monster, they braided 36,830 small steel wires into giant main cable bundles with a diameter of 44 inches. The total length of this cable matrix reaches 186,411 miles, enough to wrap around the Earth's equator 7.5 times. Like a living organism, this entire sensitive steel structure can expand or contract up to 7 feet each day under the solar heat. To survive storms, the bridge deck is equipped with a 46-foot high steel truss system resembling a dragon's skeleton, allowing wind to pass through instead of resisting. There are bridges where workers climb steep steel frames at dizzying heights to install massive sections piece by piece, where some leap from the railing to test their own limits, where curved glass walkways stretch above a sea of clouds, and where temporary bamboo spans tremble beneath the wheels of passing cars. In these places, every footstep echoes into open space, with deep gorges, wide rivers, or sheer cliffs far below. Some bridges are as thin as a thread suspended between mountains, swaying under harsh winds and changing weather. Others are colossal steel structures crossing vast canyons where height and wind pressure keep nerves constantly on edge. This is a journey into the world's most dangerous bridges, where each span becomes a true test of engineering and human courage. Kampong Cham Bamboo Bridge measures on average between about 0.6 and 0.9 miles, holding the record as the longest bamboo bridge in the world and connecting the mainland to Koh Pen Island across the Mekong River. Each year during the rainy season, rising water and strong currents either wash the structure away or lead residents to dismantle it, and once the water recedes, the entire bridge is rebuilt from the beginning. To complete the bridge of roughly 0.6 miles, the local community uses about 50,000 bamboo poles annually, driving piles and weaving them by hand into a dense structural frame. Although made only of bamboo and rope, the bridge has supported cars and light trucks, serving more than pedestrians and motorcycles. In the dry season, it stretches across exposed sandbars in the riverbed. Yet during the rainy months, nearly all traces disappear beneath vast floodwaters. The woven bamboo deck is uneven, and as friction makes the poles slick or loads shift unevenly, sharp gaps can form on the surface, increasing the risk of slips and injury. Ruyi Bridge stands out for its interwoven three-lane structure inspired by the shape of the Ruyi scepter, creating a rare and complex form in modern pedestrian bridge design. From a distance, the sweeping steel lines resemble a giant DNA strand or a ribbon suspended above the valley, giving the structure a detached appearance from the ground below. Although it opened only in late 2020, the bridge quickly attracted large numbers of visitors eager to experience its unusual configuration. At the intersection of its branches, the lowest level is paved entirely with transparent, reinforced glass, allowing a direct view into a drop of several hundred feet. Under humid fog or after rainfall, the glass deck becomes slippery, requiring slow and careful movement to maintain balance. Astoria Megla Bridge is the longest continuous steel truss bridge in North America, extending more than 4 miles across the mouth of the Columbia River between Oregon and Washington. The structure uses about 42,000 tons of steel, yet is engineered to flex under winds reaching roughly 150 miles per hour from the Pacific Ocean without structural failure. Its completion linked the final segment of U.S. Route 101, forming a continuous highway corridor along the west coast from the Canadian border to Mexico. To withstand strong river currents, the deepest pier was drilled more than 160 feet into the riverbed, deeper than the height of a 15-story building. Although it has no pedestrian lane for most of the year, the annual Great Columbia Crossing in October temporarily closes traffic and allows people to walk or run the full span. The entire bridge is painted a single shade of green to blend with surrounding forests, and the coating requires constant maintenance to resist salt air corrosion. Open valley prone to tropical storms, the suspended system sways noticeably as strong winds pass through, causing the side pedestrian walkways to oscillate. The relatively low guardrails by present-day standards and the wooden deck that becomes slick after rain increase the risk of slipping for those crossing. In its early years, the bridge permitted only pedestrians and livestock, contrasting with expectations for large-scale infrastructure at the end of the 19th century. The wooden planks produce loud mechanical clattering whenever vehicles pass, and the bridge ultimately ended centuries of isolation between the riverbanks, opening a crucial trade route for the region. Öresund Bridge removed the geographic barrier between Denmark and Sweden, creating the Öresund Economic Region where tens of thousands of people commute across the border each day. Instead of connecting two shores directly, the structure extends into open water and then descends beneath the surface, transitioning into the Drogden Tunnel, about 2.5 miles long. At the time of completion, this immersed tunnel was the longest combined road and rail tunnel of its kind, built from 20 precast concrete segments, each weighing about 55,000 tons. The junction between bridge and tunnel is the artificial island of Peberholm, formed entirely from dredged seabed material and largely closed to human access, so ecosystems can develop naturally. Exposed in the wide strait, the bridge frequently endures strong crosswinds capable of destabilizing large trucks, and it is occasionally closed during severe snowstorms. The national border runs directly along the span, allowing vehicles to cross from one country to the other at highway speed without physical checkpoints. Huvudär Dam Bypass Bridge is the highest concrete arch bridge in the world, spanning Black Canyon at about 885 feet above the Colorado River. Its single concrete arch extends 1,060 feet and was built outward from both canyon walls, meeting with a gap of less than about 3/8 of an inch before being locked into place. During construction, a cable system stretched across the canyon, lifted and positioned concrete sections weighing up to 50 tons in midair. The bridge was designed specifically to eliminate the narrow and dangerous hairpin turns that once crossed the top of the original Hoover Dam, reducing congestion and collision risk. Because of extreme desert temperature swings, invisible black ice can form on the deck in winter, creating hazardous driving conditions. Although it overlooks one of the most dramatic canyons in the United States, high solid barriers prevent drivers from stopping to view the dam, ensuring continuous and safer traffic flow. huge bridge is the first roadway structure in history to exceed a height of 500 meters above ground, spanning a deep canyon between Yunnan and Guizhou. Its main span stretches about 2,360 feet at extreme elevation, and the drop below is so vast that a free-falling object takes more than 10 seconds to reach the water. During construction, engineers repeatedly moved the tower positions higher to avoid hidden karst caves and massive voids within the limestone foundation. The primary cable system uses high-strength steel for flexibility against wind, while the anchor pylons are cast in solid concrete to resist seismic stresses in the valley. Thick cloud seas often engulf the canyon, making the immense steel structure appear suspended in mid-air. Completion of the bridge reduced a former 4 to 5 hour mountain journey to about 1 hour, and the actual canyon crossing now takes only minutes. Pont de Normandie stands at the mouth of the Seine River, where crosswinds can reach about 112 miles per hour, arriving in sudden gusts capable of destabilizing light vehicles. The bridge rises at a gradient of about 6%, and from a distance, its steep arch resembles a roller coaster track rather than a coastal highway. Its two inverted Y-shaped pylons reach about 702 feet in height and weigh more than 20,000 tons each, supporting a system of 184 stay cables that can be replaced section by section. The foundations are cast as massive monolithic blocks anchored deep into the riverbed to withstand potential collisions from cargo ships weighing tens of thousands of tons. From the highest point, the Seine estuary reveals a sharp contrast between an active industrial port on one side and wide natural mudflats extending toward the ocean on the other. While motor vehicles pay tolls to cross, Pedestrians and cyclists use a dedicated lane free of charge, creating a distinct difference in access across the span. Yachi River Bridge stands within a narrow limestone gorge along the Guizhou Expressway, an area known for some of the most unpredictable canyon crosswinds on the route. As wind is compressed between steep cliffs, its speed intensifies and can cause heavy vehicles to sway noticeably across the suspended span. The fog here can freeze visibility, meaning drivers may move from bright sunlight into a whiteout in about 1 second, losing sight of vehicles ahead beside a deep canyon drop. The final closure of the bridge depended entirely on natural temperature, and engineers waited until the air reached about 64 degrees Fahrenheit, so the steel expansion aligned perfectly before tightening bolts. The cable-stayed system consists of 192 heavy-duty steel cables, each bearing an average load of roughly 40 tons while supporting the deck above the valley. To complete the structure, amid layered mountainous terrain, contractors used about 62,000 tons of concrete and 800,000 large bolts to secure the steel connections. Punakha Suspension Bridge spans the fierce Pochu River, linking Punakha town with Punakha Dzong and remote highland villages, serving as a vital transportation artery in the Bhutanese Valley. Thousands of prayer flags are strung along its length, forming a multicolored ribbon that gives it the name the Pathway of Prayer in the Sky. Fully exposed to narrow valley wind currents, the bridge twists and bounces during strong gusts, often causing disorientation and a sharp sense of imbalance. During the monsoon season, from June to August, the wooden planks become slick like ice while the river below rises and surges with force. The narrow dirt paths leading to both ends are prone to erosion and turn into thick mud after rain, and visitors must pass an active traditional cremation ground before stepping onto the span. Because the deck consists of solid wooden boards, loosely set within a steel frame, each footstep produces rhythmic clattering echoes across the river, making the crossing intensely memorable. Stubna Kogel Suspension Bridge is a high-altitude pedestrian suspension bridge that remains open all 365 days of the year, despite heavy snow and winter storms in the Alps. Its deck is made entirely of transparent steel mesh, revealing a drop of about 92 feet below and creating the sensation of walking on thin air. Rather than resting on massive concrete platforms, both ends are anchored directly into rugged mountain rock, allowing the structure to blend with the natural terrain. Instead of solid guardrails, only fine steel mesh serves as protection, ensuring that views remain completely unobstructed. Located beside the upper station of the Stubner-Kogel cable car, the bridge is accessible without the need for professional mountaineering skills. Backlung Glass Bridge is recognized as the longest cliffside glass-bottom walkway in the world, extending along a limestone mountain in Mok Chau. One section of the deck incorporates sound and visual effects that simulate cracking glass beneath each step, often startling visitors despite knowing it is artificial. On days of dense fog or low clouds, the transparent surface blends into the white background, creating the illusion that the bridge disappears into mid-air and making each step cautious. Although it appears slender, the multi-layer glass can support loads comparable to hundreds of cars, yet management limits access to about 500 people at one time for safety. At night, integrated LED lighting along the sides illuminates the structure, causing the bridge to stand out vividly against the dark mountain landscape. Bixby Creek Bridge stands on State Route 1 in Big Sur, California, spanning a deep canyon where the Pacific coastline meets steep cliffs. Completed in 1932, it was once the largest single-span concrete arch bridge in United States highway history and remains an engineering symbol of the Great Depression era. The structure sits within an active landslide zone, where cliffs at both ends face frequent risks of rockfall and ground instability, especially during prolonged heavy rain. Even so, its core design has changed little for nearly a century, enduring coastal storms, major earthquakes, and destructive slope failures. The graceful concrete arch has become the most recognizable landmark along the entire Big Sur coastline. A persistent marine layer often rolls in from the ocean, at times concealing the span completely, and at other moments revealing it against a shifting grey sky. Durdivich Tara Bridge spans the Tara River Canyon, the deepest canyon in Europe and second only to the Grand Canyon worldwide in depth. Completed in 1940 and stretching about 1,197 feet, the bridge was constructed largely through manual labor on steep cliffs without modern cranes. To cast the concrete arches in mid-air during the 1930s, builders erected an enormous pine timber scaffolding system using wood from nearby primeval forests. Only 2 years after inauguration, engineer Lazar Yaukovich ordered the largest arch blown up to halt advancing Axis forces during the Second World War. Far below, the Tara River flows swiftly in a vivid turquoise tone, contrasting sharply with the grey concrete and protruding rock walls. Near the bridge entrance, a small monument commemorates Lazar Yaukovich, linking the structure permanently to the wartime history of the region. Huangchuan Glass Bridge is recognized as the longest glass bridge in the world, measuring about 1,726 feet across a karst gorge in Guangdong. Although the deck is entirely transparent, it was engineered for heavy loads, and during its opening ceremony, 2 sport utility vehicles weighing about 4 tons drove across the glass without causing damage. The main cables and towers are painted bright red, creating a strong visual contrast against the dark green vegetation clinging to limestone cliffs. The fully transparent deck can induce spatial disorientation, and some visitors experience sensations of free fall that may trigger panic reactions. With a main tower rising about 1,089 feet, Pingtang Bridge holds the tallest freestanding concrete structure ever built on a bridge. The site is also known for dense fog, where visibility can drop from about 0.6 miles to less than 16 feet in under 60 seconds, while vehicles travel at highway speed. During the summer months from June to August, moisture rising from the river forms thick cloud layers that conceal the lower structure and tower bases. Structurally, the bridge features two consecutive main spans of roughly 1,804 feet each, a rare double-span cable stayed configuration in mountainous terrain. Its completion reduced a former journey of more than 2.5 hours between Pingtang and Luodian to about 1 hour of driving. The Sky Bridge service area extends toward the canyon edge as an observation platform, officially rated as a national tourist site and incorporating a bridge museum and capsule hotel overlooking the gorge. Kingshui River Bridge stands on highly unstable karst limestone terrain, where porous mountain slopes remain vulnerable to cracking and subsidence. With a main span of about 3,708 feet, it is one of the very few super-long suspension bridges built across a deep mountain canyon rather than over a sea strait or wide river mouth. Its enormous vertical clearance has made it one of the most dangerous base jumping sites in the world, where athletes confront unpredictable canyon winds and intense psychological pressure in open air. Far below, the turquoise Qingshui River winds through an untouched valley, forming a stark contrast with the massive silver-gray steel structure suspended above. Before the bridge existed, travelers had to drive down a steep, winding road to the canyon floor that consumed hours despite the short, visible distance. During the rainy season in Guizhou, rockfall from fragile karst slopes near both approaches remains a constant and unsettling threat to vehicles entering the bridge. Thousand Islands Bridge is considered one of the most dangerous narrow-lane suspension bridge systems in North America due to strong crosswinds. It is not a single bridge, but a chain of 5 separate spans that leap across rocky island foundations over the clear waters of the St. Lawrence River. Drivers must cross 5 consecutive spans with sudden elevation changes while surrounded by a full 360-degree panorama of thousands of green islands and scattered historic castles. Designed under 1938 traffic standards, its lanes are much narrower than modern highways and lack emergency shoulders, increasing tension when strong lateral winds strike the deck. More than 2 million vehicles cross the system each year, and its inauguration by Franklin D. Roosevelt and William Lyon Mackenzie King turned it into a lasting symbol of cross-border partnership. Agassiz Bridge stands at the most dangerous landslide hotspot along the AH-26 highway in southern Leyte. Although built as a modern replacement, it remains positioned over the province's weakest geological zone, where a 1-mile mountain stretch was once known as a suicide road because landslides could swallow entire vehicle convoys within seconds. Unlike major bridges that cross wide rivers or sea straits, Agassiz spans a deep gorge solely to bypass that unstable mountainside, transforming a tense and exhausting drive into a far safer crossing. Its 581-foot central span is supported by 2 uneven piers, rising about 240 feet and 246 feet from the valley floor, precisely adapted to the steep terrain. The project cost roughly $18 million at its opening in 2009, funded with assistance from the Japan International Cooperation Agency. A dual zip line stretching about 2,887 feet runs even higher than the deck, offering a direct and exhilarating view of the massive concrete girder suspended above the valley below. Perrine Bridge spans the Snake River Canyon and is considered one of the world's most accident-prone base jumping sites due to more than 5,000 jumps each year. At a height of about 485 feet, It is regarded as a relatively low and highly dangerous jump, giving participants only about 3 to 4 seconds of freefall before deploying a parachute, where any minor error can result in direct impact with basalt cliffs or the river below. The extremely short reaction window creates intense psychological pressure, with every decision carrying life or death consequences. In 2006, Dan Schilling completed 201 consecutive jumps within 21 hours using a massive crane to lift him back to the deck immediately after each landing. An earthen launch ramp remains on the eastern rim, the same site Evel Knievel used in 1974 during his failed attempt to rocket across the canyon. The steel arch was assembled entirely from both canyon rims using cable systems, as the canyon floor was too rugged for any construction vehicles to access. Clifton Suspension Bridge once held the grim record as the site with the highest suicide rate in England, leading authorities to install 7-foot-high barbed steel fencing along the pedestrian walkways. This more than 160-year-old suspension bridge still carries daily vehicle traffic, and its aging chain and anchorage system must support thousands of vehicles above a 246-foot gorge, creating intense structural pressure. To manage risk, the bridge enforces a strict 4-ton vehicle limit, and automatic barriers will drop immediately if weight is exceeded or concentrated too closely near the cliff edge. Below, the River Avon experiences tidal changes of up to about 49 feet, transforming the landscape from deep rushing water to exposed mudflats within hours. The bridge also witnessed the first modern bungee jump in 1979, performed by members of the Dangerous Sports Club from a height of about 246 feet. At night, carefully calibrated LED lighting avoids shining into the gorge to protect rare horseshoe bats, while the massive supporting chains were originally second-hand materials acquired from another dismantled London bridge after Brunel's death. Monteverde hanging bridges form the largest network of suspension bridges built entirely within a rare cloud forest ecosystem, where drifting clouds merge with the upper canopy at significant elevation. The system is also among the first in the world to use recycled materials and non-invasive construction technology, becoming a model for protected natural reserves. Because humidity remains close to 100% year-round, earthen steps and metal decks are extremely slippery, especially in sections without fully enclosed railings. Clouds and mist frequently descend to envelop the spans, and at times the far end of a bridge nearly disappears from sight. Although many bridges hang more than 160 feet above the ground, surrounding old-growth trees rise even higher, creating the illusion of walking on level terrain until looking through the mesh below. Ubain Bridge, Myanmar. Standing tall through the passage of time, like a colossal rustic skeleton, this Myanmar architectural masterpiece proudly boasts being the oldest and longest teak wood bridge in the world today. Its survival over nearly 2 centuries comes not from flashy paint, but from its own natural oil that turns the wood into an impenetrable biological fortress against rot and termites. Swirling nature forces the bridge to face drastic fluctuations of the lake, from standing bare and towering 13 feet above the dried bottom to being nearly swallowed by floodwaters lapping at its floorboards. That mesmerizing precariousness stems from 1,086 giant pillars initially lacking concrete foundations, driven only about 5 feet deep into the loose alluvial mud. Even more astonishingly, this entire 19th century structure is tightly locked with mortise and tenon joints without iron nails. The heavier the pedestrian step, the more solidly the wooden pegs grind together. Even so, the cruel reality of erosion has forced humans to secretly replace the rotting pillars with rugged reinforced concrete, silently shattering the original organic nature of this masterpiece. Kakam Canopy Walk, Ghana. Plucking travelers from the ground to throw them onto the roof of the old forest, this suspension bridge system clings its vitality entirely to the trunks of 6 giant emergent trees. The bouncing floorboard, a mere 12 inches wide, forces travelers to shuffle in a single file, enduring sudden shock waves and a slippery surface, slick with a rain of wild bird droppings. The enclosing nylon netting on both sides of the walkway also constantly disintegrates under radiation and acid from tropical mold, demanding endless manual patching by humans. Built in 1995, This precarious masterpiece is actually a desperate ecological bulwark aimed at suffocating the greed of loggers, destroying the great forest. Iya Valley Vine Bridges, Japan. Hiding like a twisting living entity across a gloomy abyss, the Iya Valley Vine Bridge system is Japan's most mysteriously legendary and tragic heritage. For this massive biological mass, weighing from 11,023 to 13,228 pounds, to hang proudly, indigenous workers had to gamble their lives climbing barehanded up steep cliffs to harvest the wild vines. The bridge span stretches solitarily across a void of 148 feet and hangs precariously 46 feet above the raging water, where sharp, cold reefs at the bottom constantly open their mouths, waiting to swallow errant footsteps. Poignantly, this masterpiece was born not for trade, but as the desperate defensive shield of exiled 12th century samurai warriors, ready to sever in a flash to drown the enemy into the deep abyss. Carrick Areda Rope Bridge, Northern Ireland, UK. Stretching across the churning ocean throat like a fragile spider web, this iconic Northern Ireland structure is actually a pathway leading straight into the fossilized magma core of a volcano extinct for 60 million years. The precarious bridge span reaches across a gap of 66 feet and hangs suspended 98 feet above the water, where violent waves are tearing white foam on jagged, sawtooth-like hidden rocks. The beautiful jade water below is a lethal chilling machine at 46 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, ready to drown anyone who falls with immediate muscle-spasming thermal shock. Few expect that this terrifying walkway was woven 250 years ago, not for sightseeing, but as a sweat-drenched survival gamble by fishermen to net migrating salmon runs. To shoulder tens of thousands of modern lives, that rustic, rough rope shell is actually hiding high-strength steel cable cores to maintain a completely fake, pristine beauty. Even so, the fury of the wind and storms is still enough to collapse human pride, causing many travelers to cry in panic on the rocky island and be forced to call a rescue boat in ultimate shame. Today, we begin with roads that don't just connect places. They test how far you're willing to go. From remote desert highways and icy mountain passes to narrow cliffside routes and high-altitude crossings, each path feels closer to a risk than a road. Look closely. Is that a route meant for travel, or a thin line carved through terrain that was never meant to be crossed? Watch as drivers move forward with no margin for error, trusting their skill against steep drops, unpredictable weather, and endless isolation. This is where every journey becomes a decision, and the road itself determines how far you can go. Join Explore Horizons as we witness these breathtaking and unforgiving landscapes where danger and beauty exist side by side in ways that feel almost unreal. Zojila Pass. The name Zojila is not for poetry, but a bloody warning about the pass of blizzards, the leading cause of death in this land. This sole lifeline is an extreme psychological challenge, as 90% of the road length has absolutely no protective guardrails. Separating life from the 3,300-foot abyss is just a jagged edge of earth, where trucks clinging to the cliff look as small as a colony of ants. In summer, melting ice waterfalls pour onto the road surface, turning the path into a rushing stream waiting to wash away the rocks beneath the wheels. The battle is not only outside. Sudden pressure changes cause drivers pain, nosebleeds, and vomiting right inside the cramped cabin. Most terrifying are the sharp turns, where the rear of the bus swings out into the air, hanging suspended over the mouth of the deep abyss, before gripping back onto the road. Mount Hua. Known as the most dangerous mountain under heaven, this sacred place is not for the faint-hearted, as it is separated from the world by vertical cliffs. The fear lies not only in the height of over 7,067 feet, but in the powerful suction winds that can blow people away, combined with an abyss over 3,281 feet deep right below. The ultimate mental challenge lies on the rough wooden plank road, only 12 inches wide, loosely nailed to the cliff, where one slip means falling into nothingness. Looking from afar, the line of people inching along the narrow ridge looks like they are riding on the back of a giant stone dragon, flying in the blue sky. The journey of conquest also involves stairs carved straight into the rock with a nearly vertical angle, forcing climbers to use both hands and feet to hold on. Darkness covers this majestic beauty with a rumor of 100 lives swallowed every year, turning it into a magnet for those craving to conquer death. Captain Cook Highway, Australia. Captain Cook Highway is not just a beautiful coastal road, but a place where your attention is constantly pulled between one of the oldest rainforests on Earth and the largest coral reef system in the world. Stretching for about 47 miles, this route clings tightly to the edge of the Coral Sea, making every drive feel like a narrow passage suspended between mountain and ocean. One of its most serious dangers comes from river mouths crossing the route, where saltwater crocodiles, reaching about 20 feet in length, may live in the muddy water beside the road. The highway bends again and again through tight curves, forcing drivers to stay focused at all times while also watching for wild animals suddenly crossing ahead. During storm season, the road can be cut off by landslides falling from the slopes, or by rising seawater washing across the pavement, turning a peaceful trip into a real test. Because of that mix of overwhelming beauty and unpredictable danger, Captain Cook Highway is often seen as one of the most unforgettable coastal driving experiences in Australia. Ma Pileng Pass, Vietnam. It is no coincidence that this road is named Horse Nose, where the slope is so treacherous that even the most durable animals are exhausted and collapse. Rising above the deep green forests, the landscape here is a desert of billions of sharp cat-ear rocks pointing straight to the sky like cold spikes. At the foot of the pass, is a fracture canyon, nearly 3,000 feet deep, a massive geological scar created from the Earth's crust hundreds of millions of years ago. Flowing at the bottom of the abyss is a river carrying a strange emerald green color, mixed from freshwater algae and calcium salts melting from ancient limestone cliffs. The harshness peaks when wind gusts are compressed in the narrow canyon, blowing hard enough to lift the handlebars and push travelers toward the deep abyss. It is this thorny and haunting beauty that honors Ma Pi Leng as the uncrowded king, dominating all the most majestic mountain passes in Vietnam. Bayburt Off-Road, Turkey. Few suspect that this deadly road was carved into the rock cliff by the Russian army using only picks, shovels, and primitive explosives in 1916 to transport heavy artillery. Climbing straight to an altitude of over 6,600 feet. This is where thin air and fickle weather can cause fog strips to suddenly swallow all visibility in the void. From the top of 29 vertical hairpin turns, the path just traveled lies stacked right beneath the feet like the edge of a skyscraper with no escape. The dirt road is so narrow that at sharp turns, drivers are forced to hold their breath and perform forward and reverse maneuvers right at the mouth of the bottomless abyss to squeeze through. On the edge of the unguarded road, floating clouds often obscure the ground, turning this journey into a life and death gamble with wild nature. Overcoming this road is not simply moving, but a certificate for the courage and superior skills of drivers who dare to look straight into the eyes of death. Rohtang Pass, India. Bearing the creepy name Pile of Corpses in the local language, this pass is a historical witness of thousands of lives swallowed by snowstorms in an instant. The life of the road is exchanged for the lives of workers clearing snow in sub-zero temperatures, with the haunting slogan, "Our blood mixes with the asphalt." At an altitude of nearly 13,000 feet, oxygen levels drop to only 60%, making changing a tire as exhausting as running 3 miles on the plains. Ironically, right in that oxygen-deprived space, thousands of cars are stuck bumper to bumper for 5 hours, emitting black smoke that melts eternal glaciers. The horror is most visible when looking down into the abyss without guardrails, where the wrecks of trucks that fell years ago still lie rusting as a silent warning. Ultimately, Rotang is not just a traffic gateway, but a giant common grave where the boundary between life and death is more fragile than ever. T.S. Skratskaro Pass, Georgia. Skratskaro Pass does not feel like an ordinary mountain road, but like the rocky spine of a giant beast lifting you into one of the wildest skies in Georgia. Its name, the Pass of 9 Springs, comes from 9 natural mineral water sources rising from the ground, a clear sign of the strong geological forces still alive beneath this high land. On many stretches, you seem to drive above the clouds themselves as white mist pours over the ridges and fills the valley below like an endless glowing sea. The rough track follows the mountain crest with loose rock, steep grades, and weak grip, so even a short crossing can still take about 4 hours. And when the snow refuses to melt, the pass simply closes on its own terms, preserving the lonely and untamed spirit of one of Georgia's highest hidden treasures. Tateyama Kurobi Alpine Route, Japan. This is not just a mountain road, but a one-of-a-kind sightseeing route cutting through the northern Japanese Alps, where humans layered different forms of transport to cross a harsh highland world. The route stretches about 23 miles and uses 7 kinds of transportation, from cable cars and electric buses to an aerial ropeway, creating a complex system that still aims to protect the fragile alpine environment. Across the journey, the elevation changes by more than 6,500 feet, rising from about 1,600 feet to about 8,000 feet, so the landscape shifts dramatically from temperate forest to alpine meadows and cold, rocky ground near the summit. In the heavy snow season, the snowpack can reach about 66 feet, and GPS-guided plows cut through it to create a giant corridor of vertical white walls where visitors are allowed to walk below in a controlled, safe zone. The route also passes a 610-foot arched dam that once stood as the tallest in the country, and in summer, its massive water releases often throw up huge clouds of spray and bright rainbows. Opened to the public in 1971, the route also features a ropeway that crosses more than 1 mile without a single support tower, giving a full panoramic view over deep valleys and snow-covered peaks. Coquihalla Highway, Canada. Known as the highway through hell because the weather and terrain here can shift from calm to brutal with shocking speed, this is the main route linking Canada's Pacific coast to its interior plateau. Within about 62 miles, the scenery changes from dense wet forest to bare mountain slopes and then into semi-arid land, making the road feel like a passage through several climate zones at once. Because it lies in the transition zone between moist ocean air and cold continental air, this highway can change from dry pavement to blinding snow in a very short time, causing visibility and traction to collapse almost instantly. At the highest section, average snowfall reaches about 38 feet each year, so maintenance crews work around the clock, while huge grey concrete snow sheds are built to divert avalanches over the vehicles below. On the long downhill sections, deep gravel runaway lanes climbing back uphill are placed as a last line of defense to stop trucks that lose their brakes before they become disasters. The full 124 miles of highway through steep mountain terrain was completed in the record time of 20 months in 1986 to serve strategic transport needs. Maze District Roads, USA. Nicknamed the loneliest dead land on Earth, this stone maze is a place where every map starts to lose meaning under the rule of geology. These roads are really nothing more than faint wheel tracks clinging to sandstone and deep sand, so fragile that a hard windstorm can almost wipe them out across the empty land. True to the name, the maze, the whole landscape is torn into countless canyons, cliffs, and mesas layered over one another, and from above, it looks like giant folds across the brain of the earth. The rock here has gone through nearly 300 million years of deposition and erosion, shaping red-orange sandstone towers, sheer walls, and deep shadowed cuts through the desert. Even in this harsh place, human traces remain, with rock art and ancient evidence of life showing that people entered this stone maze about 8,000 years ago. But if a vehicle breaks down out here, all of that beauty turns instantly into a survival problem, because recovery usually costs more than $2,000 and specialized help can take many hours, sometimes even days, to arrive. Changla Pass, India. Like driving on the roof of the world at an altitude of 17,585 feet, where clouds float right at eye level, completely separated from the earth below. Even in the middle of the sunny summer, the road is still sandwiched between vertical eternal snow walls up to 10 feet high, creating a mesmerizing white ice canyon. The harshness is shown through the deadly temperature range when the sun just sets. The cold of -13 degrees Fahrenheit strikes instantly, freezing engine oil. The road surface is also a trap of melting ice streams at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, flowing fast, ready to freeze into hard rock at night or wash away vehicles during the day. This is the mandatory challenge gate to pass if you want to touch the paradise, which is the famous saltwater lake lying across the border in the distance. $1 Million Highway, USA. Behind the flashy name, legend has it that the foundation of this road was built with waste rock filled with gold and silver scraps from the old mineral fever. You will be overwhelmed by mountains glowing red, like bleeding, a great chemical phenomenon when tons of iron ore and sulfur oxidize in the blue sky. Deadly charm exists through beautiful turquoise streams that are actually water contaminated with toxic acid and heavy metals from old mines. Running along the edge of the 1,000-foot deep abyss, without guardrails, your wheels roll past rotting mining towers, standing lonely like dry skeletons of history. This is also where death lurks, with over 100 identified avalanche paths ready to sweep all life into the bottom in the blink of an eye during winter. The Million-Dollar Highway is a brutal testament to human aspiration, reminding us that the road to ultimate treasure always lies right next to death's door. Lysebotn Road, Norway. From above, Lysebotn Road looks like a giant rope twisted tightly along a mountain wall, forming one of the most dramatic and challenging roads on Earth. The road drops suddenly from about 3,058 feet down to sea level within a surprisingly short distance. To overcome the vertical cliffs, engineers designed exactly 27 sharp hairpin turns that twist like a ribbon tied in knots. The average gradient is around 10%, but the tight curves constantly shift a vehicle's balance and push braking systems to their limits. The surrounding cliffs are also famous worldwide as a prime base jumping location because of their impressive vertical height. Lysebotn Road proves that humans can carve a path even in places that once seemed reachable only by eagles. Col de l'Isère, France. Rising through snow and grey stone at nearly 9,100 feet, this pass feels like a black blade suspended over the Alps, where even the thin air alone can turn the journey into a harsh test. Since 1938, it has belonged to the legend of the Tour de France, where the greatest riders have had to empty their lungs and legs to reach an altitude where the air itself begins to fight the body. The higher it climbs, the more the green world disappears, giving way to grey rock, permanent ice, and streams of meltwater cutting down from the steep mountain walls. In early summer, the road often opens between snow walls, rising to about 33 feet, turning the whole pass into a surreal frozen corridor in the Alps. At the summit, a small chapel built from local stone blends into the mountain like the final mark of the journey, reminding you that this place is not only beautiful, but also cold, high, and unforgiving. BR 230/Trans-Amazonian Highway, Brazil. Cutting through the green lung of the planet, this scar, stretching about 2,650 miles, stands as proof of humanity's reckless ambition and its brutal failure against the wild force of nature. Begun in 1972 under an ambitious slogan, the road was once imagined to run nearly 5,000 miles, but the project was ultimately abandoned because nature was too fierce and the cost became too great. About 80% of the road is still unpaved, so the rainy season turns it into a vast swamp that can trap trucks for weeks, while the dry season buries everything under thick red dust between walls of trees rising as high as 164 feet. It also cuts across countless Amazon tributaries, yet many sections have no bridges, forcing vehicles to gamble with their lives on fragile ferries or through dark, muddy water. Clearing the forest for the highway stripped the soil of its grip and caused erosion of about 45 tons per acre each year, leaving the road warped and unstable, while countless illegal side tracks spread from the main route for logging and gold mining. Crossing the lands of more than 10 ancient tribes, the highway helped ignite bloody conflicts that lasted for decades. Stalheimskleiva, Norway. It looks like a ribbon of stone and asphalt pinned tightly to a cliff face. An old road opened between 1842 and 1846, and carved entirely by hand through harsh mountain rock. In less than 1 mile, the road climbs nearly 820 feet, twists through 13 hairpin bends and ranks among the steepest roads in northern Europe. So from the top, all you see is a deep green drop that feels threatening. The entire route clings to the edge of a plunging valley, where the cold grey of sheer rock crashes against the thick green below, creating a view that feels both majestic and dangerous. The stone walls along the cliff edge have held their ground for nearly 200 years, like a warning that this is not a place made for human error. The most haunting part is that several sections are trapped between two large waterfalls, where mist and the roar of water fill the whole space like a trap that is always waiting. '. Today, motor vehicles are no longer allowed on the road, so the only way to fully feel how punishing it is to climb it on foot or by bicycle. Coquihalla Highway, Canada. Known as the highway through hell because the weather and terrain here can shift from calm to brutal with shocking speed. This is the main route linking Canada's Pacific coast to its interior plateau. Within about 62 miles, the scenery changes from dense wet forest to bare mountain slopes and then into semi-arid land, making the road feel like a passage through several climate zones at once. Because it lies in the transition zone between moist ocean air and cold continental air, this highway can change from dry pavement to blinding snow in a very short time, causing visibility and traction to collapse almost instantly. At the highest section, average snowfall reaches about 38 feet each year, so maintenance crews work around the clock, while huge grey concrete snow sheds are built to divert avalanches over the vehicles below. On the long downhill sections, deep gravel runaway lanes climbing back uphill are placed as a last line of defense to stop trucks that lose their brakes before they become disasters. The full 124 miles of highway through steep mountain terrain was completed in the record time of 20 months in 1986 to serve strategic transport needs. Ruta 32, Costa Rica. Cutting through the core of one of Costa Rica's largest national parks, Ruta 32 is a vital road about 98 miles long, linking the capital to the Caribbean coast. Along the roadside, Gunera insignis spreads leaves up to about 7 feet wide across the rock walls, while the canopy of ancient trees closes so tightly that even daylight starts to fade. Entering the cloud forest, humidity rises to nearly 100%, and low clouds often spill across the pavement, sometimes crushing visibility to less than 16 feet and making drivers feel as if they are searching their way through a tunnel of fog. Inside that cold, wet mountain mass, the road passes through a tunnel about 1,844 feet long, drilled through hard rock and remembered as one of Costa Rica's most notable infrastructure landmarks of the 1980s. That is also why Ruta 32 is seen as the country's most geologically dangerous road, where heavy rain and steep volcanic slopes keep triggering landslides, making periodic closures a normal part of the journey. Saddle Road, Hawaii, USA. Cutting across a cold, wild saddle between two of the largest volcanoes on Earth, Saddle Road links the eastern and western sides of the island through a world covered in black rock and highland wind. The strangest sight is that across endless dark basalt fields The yellow and white road lines burn sharply against the ground, like a man-made slash across the surface of another planet. After the modernization, from 2004 to 2017, the old rough military trail was turned into a smooth paved road, stable enough to serve as one of the island's main lifelines. What is rare is that in one short drive, the scenery shifts from tropical rainforest to alpine desert, inside a region that holds 10 of the Earth's 14 climate zones. That is also why this road became the main access route to world-class observatories set above 13,000 feet, where humans placed machines that look deep into space on the back of an ancient volcano. Kibba Village Road, India. At about 14,010 feet above sea level, this is the access route to one of the highest motorable settlements on Earth, a road that feels suspended between sky and stone. It winds along cliffs above gorges deeper than about 984 feet, while the road itself narrows to only about 10 to 13 feet, with dozens of sharp hairpin turns and many exposed edges without guardrails. The surface is mostly compacted dirt, broken rock, and rough gravel because the ground keeps shifting and meltwater keeps eating at it, so the road is never truly stable. Along the route, a steel suspension bridge, more than 328 feet long, crosses a deep ravine, acting like a fragile link between the mountain track and the isolated settlement. On both sides, box-shaped houses with walls about 12 to 20 inches thick are built from packed earth and broken stone, helping keep the cold outside in a landscape that stays harsh for most of the year. In winter, the entire physical landscape changes when the road is buried under deep snow, transport infrastructure stops functioning, and the area becomes almost completely isolated for months at a time. Georgian Military Highway, Georgia/Russia. Cutting across the Caucasus, this vital road stretches about 132 miles and serves as a direct land corridor, linking the South Caucasus with the Russian Federation. From green lower land with large reservoirs, the road climbs toward a pass above 7,800 feet, where the landscape changes into bare slopes, dry grass, and peaks capped with almost permanent snow. In some stretches, it is squeezed beneath the floor of a very narrow fracture gorge, then suddenly twists into repeated U-shaped bends, clinging to the steep mountainside. To defend against avalanches and rockfall, half-open concrete galleries were built tight against the cliffs, letting snow and debris slide over the roof while vehicles move below. In its modern form, the route was begun by the Russian military in 1799, first intended as a corridor for hauling heavy artillery across the mountains and tightening control through the Caucasus. Today, it remains a critical freight artery where thousands of trucks crowd this narrow mountain route, and border lines can stretch for more than 12 miles like a giant ribbon of metal wrapped around the slopes. Sidu River Bridge, China. Completed in 2009, this bridge held the title of the highest in the world for years, with its deck hanging about 1,627 feet above the gorge floor, so high that the empty space below could swallow the Empire State Building whole. Because the canyon was too deep and dangerous for boats or helicopters to carry the first line across, engineers fired the pilot cable over the gap with military rockets, a method almost never seen before in bridge construction. The main span stretches about 2,953 feet, with no support tower in the middle, making it look like a giant thread thrown across a geological crack carved open by the river over millions of years. Two H-shaped towers rising to nearly 400 feet, together with massive steel cables anchored deep into the rock, hold the giant structure in place while still allowing it to sway slightly under strong wind and heavy truckloads. Its bright orange suspension system stands out sharply above the green forest below, yet it is often swallowed by rolling clouds that create the eerie feeling of driving straight into empty air. That is why the bridge is not only an engineering feat worth about $100 million, but also a vital highway link that turned a mountain crossing once measured in hours into a drive of only minutes. Fjallabaksleid Sydri, F210, Iceland. Fjallabaksleid Sydri, also known as F210, feels like a gateway into a post-apocalyptic world where black earth, violent wind, and rushing water combine into one of Iceland's most unreal roads. Its most famous challenge is the series of river crossings, where water can rise by about 1 foot in only a few hours as glacier melt increases, turning a safe path in the morning into a trap by afternoon. The landscape is stunning because of the sharp contrast between black volcanic sand deserts and bright neon green moss spreading across dark rock. You can travel all day without seeing another person, beside deep canyons and silver rivers below, with the strange feeling that you are the last person left on Earth. Moteng Pass, Lesotho. Moteng Pass stands like a stone gateway into the kingdom in the sky, where the usual heat of Africa suddenly gives way to a world of ice and snow. The summit rises to about 9,252 feet above sea level, higher than the tallest peaks in many other countries. From road edges with almost no guardrails, the valley below opens like a giant, dark pit, making even a small mistake feel unforgivable. The most dangerous threat is black ice, a clear and nearly invisible killer on dark pavement that can send a vehicle out of control without warning. Even worse, fog can surge upward from the valley in seconds, erasing all visibility and turning the entire pass into a brutal test of nerve. North Coast Road, Mauritius. Winding through the most beautiful bays of the Indian Ocean, this road is a giant natural swimming pool surrounded by coral reefs with an average depth of only about 6 feet. The landscape explodes with color in summer, when thousands of flamboyant trees bloom simultaneously, turning the road into a bright red tunnel of fire running for dozens of miles. The iconic highlight lies in the small church with a bright red roof right at the water's edge, a place to commemorate shipwrecks, but became the most famous wedding photography sanctuary. Far offshore, the horizon is broken by a volcanic ruin rock island rising from the sea, shaped sharply like the dorsal fin of a giant shark over 500 feet high. This piece was once broken in 1810 when the British Army chose this very beach to launch a surprise landing to ambush the French instead of attacking the main port. Today, the vibrant rhythm of life returns with buses dubbed mobile discos, decorated colorfully and always playing music at full volume as they rush on the road.